I find that I'm talking about this project and it's evolving so quickly that by the time I do the next presentation, I have to do a whole new presentation because we're in a whole new place. I'm going to talk about three things. I think we all know that we're in a historical opportunity for major climate bill in 2021. This is a whole sea change from where we were just a few years ago. In 2018, when we started the coalition in New York for the Off Fossil Fuels Act with Sunrise and 350 and Food and Water Watch, nobody was talking about a federal solution to the climate crisis. When I joined the climate movement a few years ago with the big march that happened in New York, my first question is, what is the demand? You know, what is the solution to this overwhelming nightmare? And I had been involved in the LGBT movement and getting the Equality Act to be our federal legislative strategy, which was a comprehensive civil rights bill for the gay community and also women. And I was also involved in the immigration reform fight for comprehensive immigration reform. And that was a real fascinating framework and movement with massive infrastructure, a nationwide coalition at the top, linked to all the statewide coalitions. So since I've been involved in the climate movement, my questions and my goals have been really the same, to try to help forge the conversation about what the demand is for federal legislation, what's the demand of Congress. And we're particularly focused on the solutions that will actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions so that we don't, kill ourselves next year passing something momentous only to find out that it's not actually going to work. And that really is a function of the timing, since we're up against this clock to 1.5 degrees pollution in the air and 2 degrees, which is ticking by so quickly, it's horrifying. We need to know that the solutions that we implement are going to actually start to reverse this trend on time. And then the last piece is we need unity for political power. My assessment of the climate movement is that we're losing the battle against big oil. This is not like a revelation, obviously. And even most recently, they're winning subsidies and bailouts. So to me, that's a call for greater unity and for all the environmental groups to come together, but also more broadly, civil society needs to be brought into the legislative advocacy effort. So I'll tell more about what we're doing on that front. And then we need infrastructure. We really do need a forward-facing campaign that all the thousands of environmental groups can join, and that has public-facing leadership, and that we all understand what the strategy is going into next year. So we're doing our small part of this to try to lead by example and create these frameworks. The first thing we did was create the Climate Crisis Policy Digest, which I'll show you in a second, last year, and we collected 150 expert sources, and teams read them all, and we organized them under Project Drawdown's top 100 greenhouse gases, plus environmental justice and just transition. And it turned out there were about 700 or so plus solutions and broken down into all those sectors. That really shows you the lay of the land in terms of what the experts and the advocates and state laws that have been passed think we need to do. So this is the lay of the land for the scope of the demands for action by Congress to change this situation. And from that, we've now distilled 10 bills, and we're calling it the 2020 Climate Bill Package. And those are bills backed by leading organizations and written by leading organizations in the climate movement, NRDC, Food and Water Action, Family Farm Action, Climate Justice Alliance, Center for Biological Diversity, many others, filed by many wonderful representatives across the country, many states and you wouldn't expect. I think my pictures of all of us are, and let's see if I can do that, blocking what you can see the names of everybody. But that's all right, you get the idea. And it covers many areas. The 10 bills: regenerative agriculture, fracking, fossil fuel subsidies, plastics, refrigerants, factory animal farms, toxic pesticides, planting billions of trees, restoring wetlands, environmental justice, and just transition. And then, of course, tons of jobs associated with all that. So the idea is quite simple, is that we don't individually within those realms have enough power to pass comprehensive federal legislation. But if we join together, we might have a much better shot at that. So when you start to package all these various sectors, you bring in the people who are, passionate about bees and butterflies and biodiversity when you ban toxic pesticides, and animal rights and shuttering factory farm. You bring in the animal rights activists and people who care about all the environmental fallout from that. And the factory farms, of course, are feeding them as what's resulting in lots of forest destruction so that they can grow the feed for the factory farming. Plastics, the idea there is to make the manufacturers responsible for their own waste streams. So that's a novel concept, and it has the backing of a whole coalition of organizations working on plastics. Banning fracking is led by Food and Water Watch, particularly near homes and schools. That has a whole constituency. It also has a great deal of resistance, as you can hear in the presidential debates and the DNC platform. And I was on the phone with Cory Booker's office, and they were also hedging on this issue. And so I'm just, perplexed at that if it's not just the pure politics of the matter. But then these bills also help fossil fuel workers and communities with transition. There's a bill that would outlaw hydrofluorocarbons, basically changing the refrigerants in all the cars and air conditioners and the freezers. Such an easy thing to do, and it has bipartisan support and industry support, and that would have huge impacts. It's all these hydrofluorocarbons that you never see, but are seeping out of all these machines into the atmosphere and causing exponential levels of warming compared to regular carbon. There's protection in these bills for communities suffering pollution. For the folks that are interested in democracy and fighting the oligarchs, there's an antitrust review and moratorium on big ag. The package also has a bill that would stop $15 billion a year in taxpayer welfare to big oil. And if you're not already excited by that package, there's a Job Corps to hire thousands to plant billions of trees and restore wetlands. There's a lot in the package, and now the trick is to find the activists in each district and go get the votes. This is the list of the bills. And these are just the bills so far. And these are not a comprehensive climate bill package, but they're core elements of what should be in one. And there are other bills that we're going to be adding over time through the process. It's an open community process. We have meetings every 2 weeks on Wednesday. I've been doing that since July 1st. I'm exhausted from having meetings every 2 weeks on Wednesday. But nevertheless, it's going great. There are bills on international forests to ban products into the United States that have been sourced from illegally deforested lands, to protect the habitats of the orangutans and the Amazon. And there's a bill to ban fossil fuel infrastructure, which is in the works now from Food and Water Watch. And there's a Climate Equity Act, which you'll hear more about probably in a minute. And there's a new bill, Justice for Black Farmers Act. So we'll be constantly adding bills as they're written. And then let me just tell you, and so the idea, you see the idea. We want to unite all the parties who care about all those individual issues into one mega force to force Congress to act next year. So in terms of building a national network, this is obviously something that should happen at the top of the pyramid of environmental organizations, in my opinion. In the immigration movement, there were the coalition had the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and the National Association of Evangelicals and the ACLU and NAACP. And so all these groups that care about immigration obviously work together to decide what the bill should look like. They had mobilization ready, multiple marches on DC, a big fast on the lawn. These things should happen at the top, in my opinion, but I often find you have to start at the bottom to move the top. So what we're doing with this project is we're going forward and having organizations adopt a district in all 435 congressional districts. There's only, there's 435 people that can decide the fate of humanity and the direction of the United States, and then of course the Senate. So my philosophy is you have to organize in every district. You got to get the pro votes to get, half of 435. then you also have to soften the opposition. So the idea is to create many coalitions in each congressional district. And we already have 66 districts adopted in 20 states. And we've only been putting this in motion for the last couple months. And the groups that have adopted the local, their own district are the local chapters of 350 and Climate Reality and Unitarian Universalists, Sierra Club, Faith Leaders, Interfaith Power and Light. So these are, grassroots leaders with gravitas and, connections. And the idea is that we're going to add the faith leader to this team and a scientist. So we're in touch with March for Science, and they're talking to Unity of Concerned Scientists, trying to bring the scientists into the advocacy side. We're also working with Drawdown on this. And then our faith team is led by Corinna Gore with the Center for Earth Ethics, and Church World Services is involved. And on EJ fronts, I like to tout that we're close with Climate Justice Network, which you're going to hear more about in a minute, and Anthony, and the National Action Network, which is Al Sharpton's organization, and they've been involved since the beginning. So the real idea is to get ready for 2021. As I said, we need, I believe, a National Climate Federation linking together the various centers. I think there are different networks and different coalitions. There are obviously different networks and coalitions working on the individual issues, but even at the macro level, there are circles of organizing going on, and Food and Water Watch's center on a big group of legislative directors in DC that are starting to coordinate and hopefully will formalize their network. The U.S. Climate Action Network is another network of organizations, and you get the idea. There are various of these, and I think the best hope we have, given the amount of time we have before next year's fights commence, the best hope we have would be to link them all in some sort of federation, a network, so we could at least have a joint federal-facing campaign like Reform Immigration for America did, and clarity about what the demands are, resolving any disagreements on what the policy issues are, which is should be easier than it is, and then clear public plan and leadership that is transparent so everyone understands how to participate. And the idea then we would engage in unified lobbying and simultaneous direct action. And the last piece I think is really important is a joint media and marketing campaign. And I'm really happy to say that we've now made great contact with two incredible marketing agencies, one in DC and one in New York. And they're both saying yes to helping us to create a multi-agency marketing campaign for the Earth, for the solutions to save Earth, so that we next year set the debate terms going into this, what's going to be a fascinating debate, obviously. And those two agencies have me so excited because of their contacts and their interest. If you don't know already, the media industry has stepped up through the Columbian Journalism Review, and they're having an initiative to help the media do better in terms of reporting on this topic. And the legal community has stepped up with the Sabin Center, and 25 law firms are drafting sample legislation for the city, state, and federal level, really, actually. And they have the law firms, and now we're going to have the marketing industry. And I tell you, I think this is the missing piece of the puzzle, and I feel excited now that we're going to have a solution to that. So in terms of next steps, and I'm going to show you the website just real quickly after this, if I have a couple minutes, but join our adopted district program in New York. New York's pretty well adopted. Catherine's one of the leads, and we have like half, or at least more than half, I think, in New York, but there's always a few more to adopt, or another district that you're interested in where you're from. We have as the target everyone who has signed the Green New Deal resolution, because we feel like they should be the low-hanging fruit. And we need to figure out if there is such a thing, actually, because despite the greatness of all those bills, that a lot of them have very few co-sponsors, but keeping in mind that most of them were just filed in the last 6 months. So they're all brand new. You could join our Wednesday meetings every 2 weeks, which you can find out about on our website. You can study and support the 2020 package, join our listserv, and help us weave weave together the networks by reaching out to all of your contacts and your organizations up the chain of command. Ask the leadership, what is our plan for next year? This should be the question on everyone's mind. Every environmental leader should be, what is our plan to topple the big oil next year? And how are we going to unite together to do that? So real briefly, the digest is right here. You can see the, is that still showing, I hope?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
The sectors.
Yep, the sectors are here. And so all the sectors: electricity, greenhouse gas policy, food and ag, land, water and forest, materials, waste, recycling, buildings, transportation, just transition, environmental justice. These parallel a little bit what the state is doing. Actually, they created similar committees. And then if you click on one of these, you'll see it takes you to transportation, for example, and has the subtopics of all the issues addressed by Drawdown. And then you see the solutions: achieve 100% fossil fuel or zero emissions surface transportation by 2050. And then over here, you see the documents that reflect these ideas. And so this is, again, just to show us all the ideas that all these organizations support them. And it shows our common ground so we can really unite across topics as well and across sectors. And then the last thing I want to show you, oh, well, since this clicked over, one more thing I'll show you. The documents page. This shows you all the documents that we have collected from all the organizations that you would want to hear. So it really is the collective brain trust of the climate movement and all the experts. And the last thing real quick is we did just add a page for the climate bills that we just talked about, the 2020 climate bill package, which is going to open here. And here it is. The 10 bills are listed here. And it shows how many votes they have over here under district votes. It shows the number of groups that have endorsed them. Some have 0 because we're just still adding those. Anthony, we need to get the group list for Environmental Justice for All Act, by the way. I've been meaning to ask you. Those are the bills. If you click on a bill, it shows you all the people who have voted for or have already co-sponsored it and all the organizations that support it. And then if you click on votes, it has all the congressional districts here, all of them listed. And then you'll see that over here on the right, there, I'll stop. Somebody has adopted this district. So this is Colorado 7. Jan Rose has adopted the district. If you click on that, you find Jan Rose, her email, and the organizations that she's associated with: Climate Reality Denver Boulder chapter. And so our goal is to fill in all these little adopted district black pieces with someone who's adopted the district, so they could be the point person for anyone who's in that district to join efforts to get the local representative to sponsor the bill package for now as a starting opening salvo, but then more importantly, to build that mini local coalition across interest groups so that we're ready to throw down in 2021 and actually get this legislation passed. And that's my presentation. The last piece I'll just mention is that we have policy sector teams broken down by all the sectors, and they're reviewing the United States Climate Crisis Select Committee's new plan, and they're comparing it to the digest. So we'll see what issues the House Democrats have decided they're going to tackle within each of these sectors and what's missing, more importantly. And that will help inform our pointed advocacy going forward. And we're looking at what's missing in terms of policy, but we're also looking at what's missing in terms of greenhouse gas impact analysis, because we want to be able to, and that's why we're working with Drawdown and MIT to get them to do the analysis of these bills and figure out, okay, if we pass this bill, what impact is that going to have in reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Because that really is the only number that matters if we're going to try to save this planet from going over the cliff, or at least reduce the harm, because the cliff is almost inevitable in some respects. So they're working on that number. So we can say next year with certainty, as we're looking at legislation, we think this will do X in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions within 10 years. Because that's really the time frame that we really need results. And that means passing the bill and then implementing it and building out the infrastructure that we're talking about and building out the renewables. You know, this is obviously an impossible timeline. So we have to act like it's an emergency and do it as quickly as possible. And that means passing federal legislation with mandates and incentives, belts and suspenders, both and, because this emergency requires nothing shy of exponential effort, exponential action, and then us really uniting as a people to come together against 80 corporations and to see if we can unite or not to defeat those corporations. And to me, that's the test that humanity is facing. The climate movement, everyone. Can we put aside our differences and come together to work together next year or not? And that will determine the fate of humanity. It's our ability to work together. And I'm seeing great hope in that direction, but I feel like we have a fair amount more to do. And so I'm happy to be doing this with everyone. I know there's great hearts and minds in this effort, and I'm looking forward to us all working together and becoming an unstoppable force next year.